Folks, welcome to Paisa Vaisa. I'm your host Anupam Gupta, B50 on Twitter, and this is a really special episode because for the very first time, I have with me Manish Tangi, co-CIO, investments at Aditya Birla Sun Life Mutual Fund. Really thrilled to have him. In fact, if you guys have been long-time listeners of Paisa Vaisa, you would know that I had done an entire series, MF101, for Aditya Birla Sun Life Mutual Aditya Birla Sun Life Mutual Fund, and that's the last time we spoke to Manish, and it's been a long while there. We were talking about debt funds. Today, we are talking of something much bigger, the next decade ahead. So, Manish, welcome to Paisa Paisa. Thank you so much for doing this for our listeners.
Thank you, Anupam. Thank you, Anupam, to be here.
Sure, thanks. Okay, so try and set some context out here. Okay, we are in Feb 2021, and of course, now the mood is all of ebullience and enthusiasm and excitement, and people are now really looking forward to the next whatever 5-10 years or even 20-30 years because they feel that reform is in the air. I was just reading a great article by Manish Sabharwal where he has hope for India. So what has what has really changed in your view, because we've just gone from March to March in this, from despair to absolute optimism and hope. I want to start from here because I know that you've actually been making a case for this excitement much before the rest of us. Okay, let's just start from a context of what has changed.
I mean, okay. First, let me tell you as to what has not changed, and maybe we'll sort of try and put together some framework in terms of the incremental part of it. What has not changed is that India has been is a beautiful country and it's done well. Okay, of all the pulls and pushes over the last 25 years, this country has been doing remarkably well. That's number one thing, and everyone must recognize this. 6.5% of per capita growth is scarce.
So if you enjoyed that clip, check out the entire episode on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Through the history. And had China and some of these East Asian tiger economies had not happened, people would have marveled this idea that a country of 1 billion plus people growing at 6.5% for so long. So it's a miracle economy. Okay, so we continue to remain a miracle economy. We are growing at 6.5% for last 25 years, year after year. And, there are a few things which are beginning to change and we should discuss. But then let's set the context right that, we have done super well. And, we have transformed ourselves from being, shall I say, a very, very socialistic sort of setting that we had until mid-80s to have become a very, very open, market-oriented, free and fair economy. And we have transformed our economy from less competitive to extremely competitive economy. We have transformed ourselves from being, I think, mostly an agrarian economy in 60s and 70s to a fairly industrial economy. We are able to produce most of the stuff that you consume today, barring few goods that we import from, China and our other East Asian countries. But otherwise, we are a frontier economy in many contexts. So in a sense, as I was telling you just before this, that, I'm actually, even the past excites me of what we have done, because I'm a student of history and economic history. And there are very few instances, Anupam, that you see a country of this size, continues to grow at this pace that we've grown at. Okay, so that's number one. Okay, let's get the context first that we've done very well. Now, what has changed, Anupam, of course, is that there are cyclical parts that I'll discuss, and there are some structural parts, and and intervene. Okay, in case I'm unable to explain to you. The cyclical part, of course, is that you and I know that we've had some difficult time, in last 2.5 years, even ahead of COVID, because of IL&FS crisis, because the financial conditions tightened in India significantly, because of our yesteryear's excesses in corporate India, because we invested a lot of excess money in capacities that corporate India could not use them fully, and which is why the bankruptcies rose. And so basically, my country has had these 3-4 years of difficult time. Okay, but then these difficult times are not structural; these are cyclical ones, and the good news is that despite COVID, now we know that we seem to have had exited those difficult times even ahead of COVID. Okay, and which is why Anupam, if you see corporate India's results, okay, absolutely fantastic results, surprising everyone, and that explains why Indian markets have done so well. If you look at Indian financiers, the banks and such likes, who always, and I would like to discuss with you on finance piece more specifically, because that's what is a foundation of growth in modern times. The financiers struggled a lot, but in last 1.5 years, we've seen, despite COVID, most financiers have actually shown resilience. NPAs have not risen dramatically, and they seem to be doing fine. So these are cyclical reasons, because the ghost of excesses and NPAs and all seem to be behind us. Had COVID not happened, we would have actually been chugging along really well and doing well. But thank God COVID happened, only from the point of view. Okay, I'm sorry for all the lives and all the difficulties that people have gone through. Yet, I look at my country and my country's performance with admiration, that we've used this again and yet again as an opportunity to reform ourselves. As you and I know, that in difficult times, you can do two things. One is to feel pessimist and simply do a patchwork, or even in difficult times, you can do an alternate thing, which is to reform yourself and prepare yourself for better future.
Yeah.
And I mean, let's discuss this perhaps, afterwards, that my country has used this difficult time to reform itself. Yeah. And I have to admit that, I've been in markets and watching economy for 25 years. It's never been so good. Yeah. As much that we have done in last, 6-12 months, as someone says that it sometimes takes decades to achieve few things, and then things happen in few weeks.
Few weeks, yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned cyclical versus structural, right? Because 2017 we were growing at something like 6, 7, or 8% on GDP growth, and by 2020, even before COVID, we were down to 4%. And I like what you said. People probably now, of course, with the benefit of hindsight, people thought that this dip in economic growth is permanent. This is here to stay. Whereas from what you're saying, it was just cyclical. The cycle has now turned decisively on the other side. Now, I want you to, there is one aspect more out here that I want to ask you, because since you mentioned that this, that you're a student of economic history, do you have anything to say on the geopolitical side, right? Because this is, again, people are talking about this, the way that India has handled its crisis with the neighbors. Just now, I think yesterday, in the last month, we've had negotiations with China. We've had negotiations with Pakistan. There is this, I personally have not seen this kind of confidence on both the economic part of India, what's called the political economy, and the geopolitical side of India.
Yes.
Do you think that, what's your view on this?
It's so amazing, right? That from a relatively right-wingy government, so to say, who has been extremely hawkish to our Western neighbor, in a moment, it the sort of embrace that we had, and I'm absolutely shocked. And some of the reason, of course, is that because markets are correcting so badly, business media is not talking about it today, and even newspapers haven't covered it so well. This is a historic moment after 2003. The ceasefire of sorts, is being played down for God knows what reason, but you look at the Western media and it's full of commentary on this. This is a historic moment. And something similar in last 2 weeks you've seen with our northern neighbor, right? A complete unwind of what transpired over last 1.5 years, especially after Doklam, the things worsened and worsened and worsened. And, lo and behold, within a month, things look super cool. And, this area, so-called Indo-Pacific, and more specifically, South Asia, was commented by all people who understand geopolitics is that this is the place where the next fight will be fought. Okay, next big war will happen. Okay, this is the most turbulent place. And look at, I don't know, how true and how long it would happen. It would stay. But then, as of right now, it's pretty cool. We've had good handshake with both our neighbors. And And, peace is a condition precedent for glory. Yeah. So here we have peace with both of them, hopefully. And, as they say, inshallah, it stays for long enough.
Yeah, so that we can focus on the economic part of the recovery. Let's get into that, right? Because across all the parameters out here that you would expect from an economic recovery, look at it, let's say, from a factors of production thing, okay? Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, and technology, assuming that, you take factors of production as a broadened base. Walk us through these reforms, because these are the parts of the economy that need to move for us to really get into that 8 to 10% or even 8%. I mean, I think even 7 to 8% for 10 years is massive. It can transform our economy, uplift people from poverty.
Yes.
We've already done this once, as you just said, because people don't seem to realize that for a large open market democracy on this planet, India's economic progress is unmatched by any country in the entire world. And I don't, I just don't know why people don't. It is just, it's there for everyone to see. It's just that it's happened over 25 years. So लोगों को शायद वो मालूम नहीं पड़ता, कि what's a big deal. Anyway, so let's get into this. Which parts excite you? Which parts do you think will move so that we can achieve these? Whether it's a multi-trillion dollar, we are at about 3 trillion right now for the economy, for the GDP. Going forward, this can easily go up 10 times over maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I don't know. Tell us about this and your thesis and how you see this changing.
Okay. So first thing, and let's start with the big news first. And it's not news, of course. It's my interpretation of, the basic numbers, that India is set to become perhaps second largest economy in 30 years. And, Modi ji talks about $5 trillion. The next prime minister would talk of $10 trillion. It's fine, but in about 25, 30, 35 years time, so I think in 30 years time we'll be, I think, close to about $50 trillion economy. Okay.
Wow.
And it's not a rocket science. All I need to do is to grow at 5.5%. Okay. Per capita. My labor force is growing. China is experiencing slowdown. Every year, the number of people working in China would drift down by 0.5% now for next 30 years. Every year, my people of my country, working would go up by about a percentage. 0.5% to 1% to 1.5%, depending upon how easily my country is able to embrace women at workplace, and we should discuss that, there are many difficulties. Okay. I mean, this is not given. No country's, no person's growth, Anupam, is given. Yeah. We will have to do. Now, I mean, it's interesting that you're talking about factor reforms, Let me place one most important thing, and everything is with respect to that thing is actually much smaller. And agri reform, land reform, a lot of stuff. The biggest thing which India is embracing today is that it seems to me that my country is now beginning to celebrate private enterprise.
Big one.
This is the first time, Anupam, this country has been primarily, well, after independence, I have to tell you, before 1947, we were a feudal Raj, British Raj, feudal Raj. We were laissez-faire economy, free for all economy, but free for only British firms. We were exploited. Okay. So anyone from the world from Britain could come and sell everything, and nothing was facilitated for my local corporation. And there were no local corporations barring few Tata Birlas. Okay. What we did is that because my politicians were enamored with what was happening in USSR, we embraced socialism. Okay. We said, let's build this country, but who will build this country? There were no enterprises, no entrepreneurs, no businessmen, and no capital. So, what did state say? What did Nehru say? And perhaps right at that point in time, I'll build it. You remember in our early childhood when we were reading the stories in our social sciences, the Bhakra Nangal and such
Damn.
likes were considered as the temples of the modern India, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Nehru argued, and perhaps right. So what did India did? It said that state will build enterprises, you know. So state will give you electricity, state will build sail so that it can, you know, manufacture steel. State will set up NTPC so that it can give you power, and it goes on and on and on. Okay, it did its job, but then we know that for decades our per capita barely grew. You know, not many people realize, Anupam, but your dad, you know, lived in times where the per capita income, okay, was barely growing. Yeah. Meaning your dad's dad and your dad's dad or your dad's income was more or less stagnant. Yeah. Okay, for good 100 years, you know, from early 1900 to 1980, 70, actually the 4 generations passed living in the same condition, you know. So I mean, this is what happened. Okay. Yeah. But then, okay, its time ended. You know, it ended in the case of China in 1980. In 1978, to be precise, you know, Mao Zedong had gone, Deng Xiaoping came, he reformed the economy. Rajiv Gandhi was the prime minister then in late 80s, and he reformed a little bit, but very little. And we've always been reluctant reformers because, you know, what we had learned early on is that socialism is the way forward for poor economies. So it went on and on, but 1991 had a date, okay? As Jawaharlal Nehru said, for independence of the country, tryst with destiny,
tryst with destiny, right? Yeah.
So my tryst with economy was in 1991, okay? And said, no, this is not going to happen. State will not build steel. State will not build aluminium. Let my friends in Bombay and Delhi, you know, entrepreneurs. Yeah. Okay, so the first lesson of 1991 was embraced that, okay, state will not do it, let there be competition. But then it was a forced one, okay? Because we didn't have a choice. You know, we had gone bankrupt. Remember those days when Chandrasekhar had to actually pledge all the gold?
And we had airlifted our gold out of India.
Yes,
that happened in the midnight. Very exciting story, but not particularly good times. Yeah.
Not a one, but, you know, most audience actually, you know, I don't know. I mean, average age of the country is 28 and most of them don't know this.
No.
So we were bankrupt, okay? Yeah. But we reformed, okay? And, you know, state started to exit from businesses. But why am I giving you this history to you? To simply set a context, Anupam. Yeah. And, you know, why am I so excited right now is that, as I said, first time in India, we're beginning to celebrate. And I know I say this with a little bit of a bias. Maybe 1991 we began to celebrate. But we were reluctant then, okay? Mm-hmm. We did this because they had no choice. You know, but when Mr. Modi in Sansad makes this argument that private corporation नहीं तो हमको vaccine बना के दे रहे हैं, ये हमारा, you know, these are the guys who are actually making us feel proud. And then next day he actually argues and bets for privatization, unabashed privatization, unabashed, you know, that no business for the government to actually be in business. Let my entrepreneurs come and build this country. Okay, you know, but this is just saying, you know, you and I and every skeptic would say, ये तो कहने में क्या है, कोई भी बोलता है. लेकिन सबसे बड़ी बात is not about कहना is also important. Yeah. But आप September 2019 में, which is why I say that Modi 2.0, okay, which is basically there is a 14 to 2019 Modi, and then there is something happens to Modi 2.0, and he goes sort of in a different drive altogether. He cuts in corporate taxes. Now that, when, you know, many years later, when your child reviews India and India's economic history, would then say, my goodness, that was the moment that the India turned. Okay, so we cut taxes. Okay, so now what are we telling? That corporations, welcome, you come and set up businesses, and, you know, we're not going to be rent seeking, we're not going to be taxing you, we perhaps will tax you lower than anyone else in the world. Okay, so in manufacturing our taxes are 15%. But then this is not all. Yeah. Then we go and do PLIs. You know what does PLI mean? It is a subsidy of sorts that if you build in India, my government will pay to you. Okay, this is how different, Anupam. Remember those days, you know, that it was remember the allegations on Soot Boot ki Sarkar of sorts. Yeah. You know, it was never easy for any prime minister to talk about that. Yes, here we are to actually bat for the corporations, but here we are saying, that I will not charge you taxes as much as I used to. Okay. Rather, I will charge you one of the lowest. On top of it, in some of these industries, if you come and set up factories here, I'll actually pay you 5%, 6%, 7% of your sales. Okay. So this is a fundamental shift. And I think this is so substantial that it'll take us years to absorb it. And therefore, what I see is that the new culture, in India of enterprise, which is big, which will begin to build India, but more importantly, Anupam, humongous amount of money in the world is waiting to come and set up factories here, okay, and make India as the office of the world. And we should discuss, okay, all of this, and all of that will happen in front of us in the next couple of years. So, which is why I think we will talk about many other reforms, agri reforms, land reforms, what we have done to labor code, what we have done to, we have made the entire country. First time India is actually, through GST, has become one market. It's one market. Kerala was a different market. Tamil Nadu was different. Everyone had different taxes. There's one market. So, what does one market do? It gives you scale. Like your podcast, Anupam, because you are speaking in English, instead, if you spoken in Tamil, only Tamils will hear, right? Yeah. But English is from top to bottom, Kashmir to Tamil Nadu and Kerala, everyone can hear, right? So that English gives you scale. Okay, GST, think of it like that. GST gives you scale. Okay, IBC, again, I don't know how but people in finance, you and me understand that what is IBC, the bankruptcy code, is that until IBC came, there was a monopoly of management. You know what management used to say? You lend to me, but in case I default, you have no choice. Yeah. Today, as a lender, I have a choice that, okay, if you're not doing it well, I'll oust you and get you another. This is humongous reform. Okay. So many of these reforms that we should discuss, but I think I wanted to emphasize that the biggest reform is that India is now ready to embrace, celebrate entrepreneurs. Okay. And that will keep strength. Remember Schumpeterian and many other liberal economists. Okay. In the end, what drives growth in a country, okay, is enterprise, is entrepreneurs, okay? And we are ready to celebrate. And now the final point, Anupam, is that when Modi ji, in about 7-8 days back, talked about enterprises and how we should celebrate them. And then later he actually built on it a couple of times and made this argument that, these are the guys, who is building India, okay? And let's celebrate them. What does it mean? It means that the political cost of celebrating enterprise is gone. Mr. Modi has built a new coalition of people in which he can go and tell a poor that it is good for you that I am exiting business. And it is good for you that when I sell my BPCL to a, XYZ firm, which is private, somehow it is good for you. What is he telling? That's a coalition now. And those guys believe in him, that when I sell my CPSTs and my PSU corporation and raise lakhs of crores, you know what I'm going to do to you? I'm going to build roads near you. I'm going to, Jal Jeevan Mission will get you Pine Ka Pani. I'll get you electricity. I'll get you everything, good education, perhaps good healthcare. And my, average Indian, who is out there in a small village is aroused because of this. And which is why I call this very statement. We're not quietly reforming right now. We are not quietly becoming pro enterprise. My prime minister is coming forward and saying this, that yes, I'm doing it and it's good for you, which is why I call it pivotal moment.
Sure. Great, Manish. I mean, you've given us a fantastic overview and backdrop about what is changing and the moving parts. Before we go into a break, I just wanted to touch upon those points that you said we should discuss. You said land reforms, you said divestment. So if you want to just tell our listeners about maybe 2 or 3 different measures that you see the government doing that really exciting, you think this is very different as compared to the past. That's the first question. And the second is, of course, you mentioned about the lower tax, that India probably has the lowest tax in the world. So any comment on government finance? Because one thing I find very different in this government is equity of taxation. I'm sure that you understand what that means as compared to the past, where you would have higher rate of taxes and fewer people. Now we are talking about lower taxes and a much larger base. Okay. So broadly, just on these points, anything that reforms that excite you, and government finances, and then we'll go into a break.
So some of the sort of reforms I've talked about it, but even things like, think of it like this, this agri reform, it's very contested, okay, today, and there are both sides,
Sure.
But in the end, it is a difficult reform, and it is, of course, very good for farmers, okay, but it is politically costly, as you've seen, and yet, government is sticking to it. So, a lot of low-hanging fruits of, letting go of license Raj and stuff like that, was relatively easy. But then, doing what you call agri reform could potentially be politically costly. But then this is the math or arithmetic or chemistry that, the government seems to have worked out that, okay, it may be in near term politically costly, but it won't be eventually, as long as in some time, I'm able to deliver to the very folks who are resisting and protesting right now. Okay. So again, a very difficult reform, but being undertaken right now. Mm-hmm. Land reforms, again, that pooling all the CPSE lands and giving it away, giving it off to people who want to come and set up factories, okay, is a unique way, a very, very East Asian-like way of actually pulling together all factors in such a manner that it becomes, very easy for the businesses to come set up factories, okay. So again, a very forward-looking, pragmatic way of actually ensuring that these factors are made available. Labor reforms, okay. It's impossible in India's of 1990s and early 2000 to do what we've done to labor. Of course, it's court right now, and it'll be live on 1st April. But in all the gig workers and the temporary workers, they are all the 55 crore workers, are all being brought under this umbrella of labor reforms. You see, what is reform? Reforms basically, well, how should I explain? Reforms invariably are such that it hurts incumbents. Okay, meaning there are always this tiny minority of people in country, okay, who benefit from a certain setting in a country, okay, and when reforms happen, invariably those people actually get hurt, okay, but then eventually broader population sort of benefits. There is no way to actually change something most of the times without hurting some. But the broad idea of reform is that at large people should benefit. Okay. So yes, it is true that, each reform that we undertake, okay, it does hurt a small section of population. But in general, most boats get lifted, and that actually eventually helps everyone, and therefore country improves. So sure. In a sense, so just a small point, Anupam, which I wanted to emphasize that, now this whole welfareism, that we have often accused our governments over the last many decades, particularly sitting in Bombay, we hate welfareism because we understand that, quite perversely, when governments are welfarist, they actually invariably leads to more poverty instead of less poverty. Okay, because limited resources must be put in places where productivity can be enhanced so that overall population can be lifted. But if I can give the same money instead of building roads, directly to people, okay, instead of building roads, it doesn't benefit most people. So in India is deserting welfareism. Contrary to what everyone thinks of this government, the subsidy bill has actually trended down almost secularly over the last 4-5 years. Okay. Correct. Again, a big reform. You know what? You are paying $100 or $95 on petrol and you don't seem to be complaining. Or maybe you may be complaining, but then it is actually a reform, because every time I and you pay $95 on petrol instead of 60-65 where it should have been had excise duty not been lifted. Basically, what are we doing? We are transferring our income to Saudi Arabia and Iran of the world. Okay, this is a very smart form of carbon tax. And what is this excess money that government is doing with? It is actually giving it to corporations to set up, factories here and build mobile phones and whatnot. So net, by at a first order, you will see, oh my goodness, look at this government, it is charging me petrol price more and giving it off to corporations. But that's not the way it works. How it works is that when it charges from you and gives PLI, the company comes and set up a factory here so that your kid gets a good job in Bangalore and Hyderabad and Noida, and somehow everyone benefits. Again, reform essentially is always about some pain in near term, but a lot of gains in the future. So we can go on about, all these things that, the government is doing, Anupam, right now, but net, all of this essentially means that, the future for my country actually looks sort of pretty bright.
Fantastic. Manish, we'll take a small break out here. Folks, we'll come back on the other side of this break and talk about specifically how this very bright future should benefit you on your finances, on your portfolio, and how you should approach your asset allocation for the next decade. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with this really mega special with Manish Sanghi, co-CIO Investments at Aditya Birla Sun Life Mutual Fund. And welcome back to this really special episode of Paisa Paisa. My guest, Manish Sanghi, co-CIO Investments at Aditya Birla Sun Life Mutual Fund. On the first part of this episode, we spoke at length about a thesis for a much brighter, a much stronger, a much more confident India over the next decade, probably, hopefully more than that, given by the reforms that we've had in the last couple of years. This part is only about you, to all the listeners. How does this, how will this change your life on your personal finance side? Really important. So Manish, just your overall, an overarching thesis of how our listeners should approach their investments, whether, it's mutual funds, stocks, equities, FDs, real estate, gold, whatever it is. Give us that.
I mean, contrary to sort of an average idea, which is popularized by most fund managers, because we would all like you to put all your money with us. Let me start with something that is the must for you and you must do. The number one thing is go and buy a house. Okay. This is our first investment. Borrow money from good bank. The money is cheap today. An average home loan is available at about 7%. Believe me, for very, very long, interest rates will remain low. While 10-year bond can do here and there, but it's very likely that, your interest rates would stay low. The property is cheap. We've had a 6-7 year of a bear market correction in properties. So first, go and buy a house for yourself. Okay. Let that be your first investment. Okay. And borrow money, it's fine. I know if I'm talking to an Indian, I'm actually talking to a person who is in late 20s and early 30s. That's an average Indian. You have a bright future ahead. Okay. You must have your house. Okay.
This is your own house, by the way, not
your
speculation or anything. Sure. Okay.
No speculation. I mean, but don't buy a second and third and fourth and fifth house. Okay.
This is where you're staying yourself for your own needs.
Yeah.
Your dream house, so to say. Okay.
Your dream house. Yeah. Okay. And stretch a bit. Okay. I mean, stretch a bit. Right now your finances may tell you that, okay, let me buy only 1 BHK. If that is so, then just buy 1.5 BHK. So stretch a little bit, okay? Because when I came in Bombay, my wife insisted that let's buy a 3 BHK, and I settled for 2 BHK then. And it was good. It would have been better for me had I bought 3 BHK then. Yeah. So I don't want you to make that mistake. Buy a 3 BHK instead of 2. Buy 2 instead of 1.
Wonderful. Okay? You're sharing from personal experience. Yeah.
Personal experience. But okay, let's get to more serious business. Okay, and which is that I'm assuming that, having done that, you still have a regular stream of income and what do you do with money. Okay. And good economy is almost always a condition precedent and in long run condition sufficient for buoyant stock markets. Okay. I mean, if economy is going to grow well, in my view, next year we will grow at 13-14%. And after that, you will perhaps, grow somewhere between 7-8%. But maybe I'm not being sort of optimistic enough, perhaps even higher. Okay. But it is going to be 7-8% at least, I would imagine, for next 10 years. So as I said, good economic growth is almost a sufficient condition most of the times in very long run for buoyant stock markets. Okay, so how do you therefore incorporate this idea of all the things that we've discussed in the first half of our podcast, that we're going to have super buoyant economy, economy which is going to do perhaps better than ever in the past. What does it mean for you? Put your money in equities. Okay, so if you are an 30-year-old guy, I've talked to you in the past also, put larger part of your allocation as much as possible. Of course, talk to friends, people like you could help a lot of people. I don't know how much, 60, 70, 80, 90%, depending upon your risk appetite, but then do participate in this, what you call India story, by investing in stocks. But you have to make a small promise to me that, I was having a chat with my son's teacher yesterday evening, and I'm going to repeat that, Anupam. You know what I told, and my son goes to PACE, and IIT, and I was telling him that, sir, आप ना पैसा डाल दें equity में, but you have to make a small promise to me that you will not look at NAV of these 5 funds for next 3 years at least. Okay, so I said I will advise you which fund to invest in, but I also need something, जैसे गुरु दक्षिणा होती है ना, तो आप 3 साल तक मत देखना इसको. तो इसे हंसने लगे वो, ऐसे बोला, ऐसे क्यों बोलते हो? ऐसे नहीं, मुझे पता है कि the only virtue in investing, okay, is to be patient. Right. Okay, mostly you put, if you talk to Anupam or Manish Dangi or 10 other people, reasonable people, they'll all give you fund selections, or perhaps just buy Nifty. It doesn't matter. So that is not a rocket science. The rocket science is this behavioral science. Yeah. Don't get itchy, don't get iffy, be patient, forget about it. I'm telling you, 3 years, but to your audience, I'm telling you, forget about it for next 10 years.
Okay? I agree with what you're saying, because people spend so much of time on choosing the funds and they spend no time on selling the funds when the market goes down. तो कहाँ पे आप सोच रहे हो यार? जहाँ पे सोचना चाहिए वहाँ तो सोच नहीं रहे हो, and then you miss out on the entire story. Please go on.
Yeah. People like you actually built this equity cult in US in 1980s. Okay. So I don't know whether you know this or not, but I have to tell you this, that, more important than people like me, okay, are the guys like you who are popularizing this idea of investing. And I know what you're doing. So
I can do that only when I have the participation of such experts like you, but thank you so much.
We are side actor, so please understand that, the more important thing is not to come to Manish Dangi's fund or ABCD's fund. More important is to invest. Yeah. Okay. So the bridge of, that, okay, aap mere idhar aa jao, is side mein, cross the river, is, convincing that is a bigger deal and then actually investing in X or Y or Z fund. Okay. Yeah. So through this, or in whichever way, let's convince our investors to cross the bridge, come here and sit here patiently for a couple of years. You will be better off. Okay, so that's the second part, that do allocate money to benefit from. See, equities are not satta. Okay, it's not speculation. It's not lottery. You know what an average person of yesteryear and people who don't understand equity, the moment you say equity, is it aap tip batao kuch. What can double tomorrow? No, it's not lottery. Yeah, it's not lottery. It is an asset class. It is like fixed deposit. It's like fixed income. It's another asset class. It has certain characteristics. It tends to earn you 5-7% more than fixed deposits. But it's not free money. What does it do? It sometimes gives you sleepless nights. Suddenly, once in a decade, for God knows what reason, sometimes because of COVID or sometimes something stupid happening in US, markets melt down. They do. Once in 2-3 years, they go down by 15, 20, 25%. Suddenly what happened today, Anupam, is that markets are down 4%. So all of this will happen. Okay. So this is the cost you're paying. What is the cost you're paying? Is that it's like, this is a this over long period of time will earn you good returns, but in short period of time there are a lot of obstacles. It's a jerky ride. Okay, it's not a smooth ride, because smooth ride is government bond. वहाँ कुछ नहीं मिलता है ना, 5-6% ही मिलता है. So if you want 10-15%, go through this process of pain. So, but there is a way. I'll give you a small trick how to avoid pain. Okay, as an investor, invest, and as I told that teacher, that then don't look at NAV for 3-4 years. So do that, and I think you will be better off. So that's the second part I would say. Invest, be overweight equities. What do you mean by overweight? I mean, I know people don't understand overweight. क्या होता है overweight? Okay, invest, okay, as much you can. आपके पास में 10 लाख रुपए हैं, तो डाल के देखो 1 लाख रुपए, 2 लाख रुपए, 5 लाख रुपए, जितना जिसकी श्रद्धा. Maybe सारा 10 लाख रुपए, but invest, and for long term, I think you will be better off. That's my advice for investors, to tie the first part of our conversation, that if there is going to be a glorious decade for India, you have a way to benefit. You don't have to be a billionaire to benefit from it. You can benefit as much in percentage terms as Mr. Ambani.
Why was this advice not given to me in 1994 when Aditya Birla Sun Life Mutual Fund was established? Yeah, you guys are what? Almost you'll be 30 years old in 2 years, Manish. And if anybody had stuck on with one of your funds from 1994 to 2021, the numbers are out there, guys. Please go and check it. Can you guys imagine a 28-year compounding? Even at 10%, okay, I don't know the performance of Aditya Birla Sun Life Mutual Fund schemes. Manish would know that more than me, but I'm just put that in your head, guys. 8 to 10% for 28 years. I couldn't do it. I wish I could. I was doing my CA at that point of time. My stipends were hardly anything. But if I could even set aside 100 rupees, per month at that point of time, and of course increase it over a longer period of time. Look at what happened in 1994 to 2021, right? Like Manish said, there would be many, many years where the markets went nowhere. I mean, 93 to 2003 is famously the lost decade of the Sensex. 2003 to 2008, it went up 7 times. And then, of course, whatever happened each and every year after that. But that's Manish's point. If you're someone who wants a 25-year-old machine to give you that kind of return, please do not get affected by these 4% गिर गया, 5% गिर गया, 10% गिर गया. Boss, 25 years के ऊपर 10% compounding can transform your wealth completely. Anyway, sorry Manish, I'm just very, I get very passionate about this because people don't regard equity as that kind of a compounding machine. All the time the same questions. कहाँ डालने का, क्या करने का? यार एक निफ्टी इंडेक्स फंड को चलाओ ना 10 साल.
Absolutely.
नहीं तुमको सोचने का है तो. Sorry, let's go back to what you were saying.
No, but you know what? I'll tell you, Swal. I mean, a little psychological stuff. Pessimism is seductive. Yeah. I mean, if I, I'll find more likes if I talk about what a sad economy we are, what we have gotten into, how many deaths have happened, COVID is going to kill us all. There are going to be millions. You remember those people who talked about millions of people dying? Yeah. Why? There were also many people, Nupam, who said no, ऐसा नहीं होने वाला है.
Yeah, nobody heard them.
But वो बोले क्या सुनने का ऐसे लोगों का.
And now the world is making studies on India. Chalo, ठीक है यार, whatever. Mani, let's wrap up with this one thought that I have. I mean, you would be getting this question so many times here. FDs are not giving me return. What should I do? Simple question. I think I can predict your answer, but tell us because you're someone.
पहले घर खरीदो खुद का, है ना? ये किराए पे नहीं रहने का अपने को. You know why? Because it's not that I hate किराए पे रहना. It's just that सस्ता पैसा मॉर्गेज में इंडिया में मिलता है और नेट घर भी अच्छा क्या घर होता है. मैं जब बंबई आया था तो मैंने 19 लाख रुपए में घर खरीदा था. अब वो ऊपर नीचे फिर भी वो 1.25 करोड़ का हो गया, है ना. और मेरे फादर ने जो 50,000 में खरीदा था एक जनरेशन पहले, है ना, वो 50,000 रुपए जो है 1.5 करोड़ रुपए हो गया है. देखो ऐसा है कि दिस इज because it's a legitimate property is an asset class. तो पहली चीज वही है ना, पहला सुख निरोगी काया और उसके बाद में अपना घर.
और तो I mean, खुद के लिए ना वो, it's for your own
के लिए. तो उसके बाद में हमने डिस्कस किया ये कि put your money in some diversify across few funds, है ना. तो वो करते हैं. उसके बाद में कुछ ऐसी भी जरूरत हो सकती है. आई मीन कई लोग ऐसे होते हैं कि 2 साल बाद बेटी की शादी है, 6 महीने बाद बेटे को यूएस भेजना है और उसके लिए पैसा चाहिए. तो वहां इक्विटी नहीं. हाँ, आई मीन इक्विटी के लिए पहला कंडीशन ऑफ माइने 3 साल नहीं देखोगे. लेकिन कोई अगर कोई अपना ब्रदर और सिस्टर वांट्स मनी 6 मंथ आउट, तो मतलब वो तो देखना ही पड़ेगा ना एनएवी. तो फिर इक्विटी में नहीं डालने का है. तो 6 महीना, 12 महीने, 18 महीने बाद में अगर किताब खोल करके देखना है कि पैसा कितना है या उस चाहिए पैसा, तो देन पुट योर मनी इन फिक्स्ड इनकम फंड्स.
There are enough products there.
There are many products, but मोटा मोटी मैं आपको कॉम्प्लिकेट नहीं करूंगा. अगर आपका 6 महीना पैसा है, तो किसी भी 3-4 अच्छे फंड हाउसेस के अंदर लो ड्यूरेशन फंड में पैसा डाल दीजिए. और आपका 12-24 महीने का, 36 महीने का अगर पैसा है, तो किसी भी ठीक ठाक शॉर्ट टर्म फंड में डाल दीजिए. दैट्स इट. कोई कॉम्प्लिकेशन नहीं है.
Just translate that last. I know that Hindi is much more easy for us, but there are quite a few people who don't understand Hindi on our podcast. Just give us that last bit in English, that if you've got money that you need for 6 months, 1 year, maybe 2 years, and probably put it in a fixed income fund, which of these do you recommend, Manish?
Yeah. So what I'm saying, Anupam, is that, if you have a 6-12 month money, okay, when I say 6-12 month, meaning you probably looking to spend that money 6-12 months out. Okay. Yeah. So put your money in any of the good low duration fund. Low duration, meaning the fund has very little risk of duration. Mostly they don't run credit risk. So put your money there. If you have, 1 to 3 year money, okay, put in short term fund. See, no one should invest 100% of money in equity also, however good that it may be. Okay. Even God comes and tell you that मैं double कर दूंगा, I'll double your money. Still, you should put some money in fixed income. Okay. I will also put my money in fixed income to that extent, because I need to ensure that whatever my routine needs are, they should be taken care of. And debt is a good friend. Okay. For your daily ka kharcha. Okay. But equity is a good friend to make you rich. Okay. Debt won't make you rich, but debt will take care of your routine life. Okay. But if if my dad is 70-year-old, okay, now how much equity should he have? He should have little equity. Mostly it should be in fixed income funds. So which is why he is in my low duration fund. He is in my short term fund.
Absolutely. Wow, Manish, I wish you had, you can come more often on Paisa Vaisa and talk talk about this for our listeners, because I love this. I mean, personally, I'm always invested in India. I'm not putting my money elsewhere. I'm convinced on the story that you said. I have always been now for a long period of time, and my equities, I just don't sell them. I just, try and keep my SIP simple. So, folks, wow. That is a wrap on this episode of Paisa Vaisa. My guest, Manish Dangi, co-CIO Investments at Aditya Birla Sun Life Mutual Fund. Manish, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this for our listeners.
My pleasure. It was a pleasure talking to you, Anupam.
Thanks, Manish. And listeners, if you like this podcast, don't forget to check other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am your host, Anupam Gupta, B50 on Twitter,